Hey guys, and welcome to the Surge Growth Partner Podcast, a podcast where we interview top-level executives inside leading and growing companies inside the IT and cybersecurity space. We're excited to have our guest today, Greg Tomchick. We'll be diving into his story, some engaging insights into the cybersecurity industry, and what his company specializes in, Valor Cybersecurity. So I'll go ahead and kick it off to you. Greg, if you could just introduce yourself, tell a quick snippet of your story. You definitely have a cool background, so if you want to maybe just touch on that prior to obviously working at Valor Cybersecurity.
Yeah, Alessandro, appreciate you having me on.
Of
Looking forward
course.
to diving in together and talking a little bit about cybersecurity and where the industry is headed. I think it's an exciting space to be in. Obviously, you guys see that with the work that you do. My background started, I was a military-born kid, multiple military bases, was able to come across a lot of different cultures. I was always fascinated by different cultures and different mindsets that people brought to communities. I like to ask those deeper questions, and cybersecurity is one of those fields that you have to get deep in order to really understand what's happening at the end of the day. I always had that entrepreneurial itch. In the summers, I started my first company when I was 12. Didn't really feel like I always fit into the social norm, and kind of wanted to find ways to find interest, whether that was through sports or through business. I helped people in my neighborhood, trim bushes and go get groceries for the older people that were in my neighborhood to try to create value for them. It felt good. I liked that feeling of serving people. Was able to be pretty successful in baseball, was on different travel teams and things of that nature, got to see the world through that type of avenue. Both my parents being military, you obviously travel the world. I always wanted to do that through whatever I chose, from a skill set or a competency, and was able to do that through professional baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. While I was playing baseball, I started a company in college doing software development. We were doing websites, application development, really just building softwares for companies that didn't have that technical know-how. About 2 years into it, we had a cyber attack. So me being in cybersecurity did not happen by accident. It happened because I was a victim of the downsides of the digital revolution. That later set me on a path where when I had to make the decision of getting out of baseball, I knew I had 100% passion for a subject that I felt the negative sides of it. I wanted to go solve it for other people, to be the person on the other end of the phone if that did happen to somebody, but helping people prepare before it happened. And that really led me to work for a number of different companies, number of different executives that are now my mentors, to about 2 years ago starting Valor Cybersecurity, where we're able to really address what we think is the biggest issue in cybersecurity today.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I always love hearing kind of how people get into the industry, because what a common recurring theme that I'm kind of finding is that people don't usually find cybersecurity, usually finds them, right? Like in your instance, obviously being a victim of a cyber attack, it kind of lit that fire under you to kind of, want to be the good guys. Cause I always frame it as the cybersecurity guys, excuse me, they're the good guys, right? They're the people that are fighting the good fight, that are obviously protecting companies, that are making sure companies don't go out of business. I think there's like a crazy statistic that, some of the small to medium sized businesses that do get hit by cyber attacks usually are like out of business within the next year. I think it's like a 70 or 80, like 60 or 70% of them are out of business next year. So, we really are, the cybersecurity people really are keeping people in business and protecting them. So I always love that angle of it as well. But I did want to ask you, obviously you've probably seen the evolution of cybersecurity. You've kind of been in the industry for a little bit to kind of see exactly things evolve and change over time. What would you say are some of the trends that you're kind of now noticing being inside the industry that you have your eye on, that you think the audience should definitely be paying attention to as well?
Yeah, this is my 8th year in the industry. I've been able to see a lot. I've always been a quality over quantity type guy. Try to put myself in positions where I get to see what the real problem areas, what the root causes are within an industry. I've done that in every business I've been in, whether it was software development or cybersecurity today, or when I was a professional athlete. I tried to get to the core of what people were facing and how you solve it from a root cause standpoint, not just patching and putting band-aids over the symptoms that are taking place, which I think a lot of the industry today is just addressing symptoms.
Yeah.
So what I was able to do when I first got into cybersecurity, obviously coming out of baseball with a heightened level of passion for this industry to really solve what I didn't have when I was running a company, that understanding of what digital security really is at its core. We all understand physical security, but we don't see digital security. So when I started in the industry, I went to a big company in Washington, D.C., was able to investigate around 750 incidents in about a year and a half. And I saw a lot of companies that kept coming back to us with the same type of incident. And I was asking myself, why is there nobody helping these companies after they have that first incident, make sure it doesn't happen again? Which we would think is like, that makes logical sense. They're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. They're going to learn their lessons. But these companies weren't learning their lessons because they weren't incentivized. I was an economics major in college, really struggled in school, but found my lane in economics because I wanted to understand supply chains, what these supply chains depended on to operate. Obviously, people are huge, but technology is a huge dependency across every industry. And that's what makes cybersecurity so unique, is it impacts everybody. It's not just a strategy that it's good to have for some people. So what I learned is that companies weren't learning their lessons when it came to cyber attacks. They were either put out of business or they forgot about it because it was that grueling situation that they went through, that they spent a bunch of money on, that they wanted to put in their rearview mirror. Um,
Mhm.
and what I turned that incident response knowledge into was a service offering for a large public company that helped companies prepare and do assessments, put in plans, and put in budgets that they needed to really start to develop security into their business model. The Fortune 500 had cybersecurity, but everybody below that was really struggling. They were spending a lot of money on point solutions, on these advanced, XDR, AI, ML type solutions that were up and coming, but nobody was able to bring it all together and create a single standard, a mindset for these executives to say, we have a digital security strategy and we know what it's addressing and we know what we're spending on it. And that's what nobody had, that we would go in and help them kind of gain awareness around, gain consciousness. And to be able to see somebody say, I now understand cybersecurity like I didn't before, and I know I need to spend money on it, that response has elevated me through the industry to do some pretty cool stuff. I've built companies for prestigious families in the United States, and now building my own company. And we get to work with some of the top organizations because we have that mindset. We're not selling a point solution. We're helping companies establish a security standard that's going to get them secure now and then scale into the future.
Definitely, and I love that kind of mindset and what you guys are really building over there, because I think it's super important when you are looking at cybersecurity. You're looking at it as, I think that people forget to sometimes calculate in the ROI of cybersecurity. Right? People always think about it as, oh, it's just like it's like insurance or whatever it may be. And to a point it is, but there's also a lot of ROI that does come from investing in cybersecurity, making sure you have the right protocols and not only the right tools, like you said, in place, but the right personnel that are monitoring those tools and the right incident response that's happening with those with events that are going to occur. Because it's not a matter of if it will occur; it's a matter of when, right? Like it's not. Like there's always something that's going to happen at some point, and what do you have put in place in order to make sure that you're going to be protected? I think that's the biggest real issue that you have to really focus and hone in on. And that kind of leads me into my question, where I did want to ask you, what are you guys really building over at Valor Cybersecurity? If you can just go into a little bit more of detail and kind of, really explain where you think clients get the most value from when they do work with you guys.
Yeah, so what we're focused on right now is building supply chain security standards for three specific supply chains in the current state. We're doing it for the defense contractor ecosystem, so companies that serve the Department of Defense with technology and services. We have a unified security standard that addresses compliance and helps them actually protect the information that they're exchanging on a daily basis. We're doing the same in the technology space, so folks that develop software and technologies, and then the investment community, the private equity venture capital organizations. We're developing what you can look at as a security standard package that scales into these businesses that they can put in as their initial security standard and then adapt it to their unique business, how their people operate, things of that nature, which hasn't existed before for a lot of these companies. And it gives them the peace of mind that other companies in my industry have benefited from this standard. They have a similar business model, they serve a similar customer, and they have similar pain points. And you can put this framework within their organization, and then it becomes adaptable in the future. And that's what hasn't existed in cybersecurity up to this point. If you think about the world we live in, there's a standard to drive a car. There's a safety standard for a building or your house, but there's no standard around operating in the digital world. And we're spending 9, 10, 11 hours a day in the digital world, but there's really no safety standard for companies to follow to help protect their customers and then to help their people when they go home and surf the internet with their family. And that's what needs to happen more. Compliance requirements are trying to get there, but people are not incentivized by compliance. It's a wrist slap. It's you're not compliant, so you're not going to be able to do business in our supply chain. They go to a different supply chain potentially. So it's going to take a while for compliance to catch up to really protect the people, the processes, and the technologies that need to be protected. So we're kind of taking a step and a stand on allow us to help you create a standard that's going to align with compliance in the future, but is also going to protect your business now so that you can keep the lights on and keep doing business and making the impact that you want to make.
Awesome. Yeah. No, and I think that's a great kind of mission value and statement to have as a company, because keeping the lights on and really just focusing on what it is that you need to be protected, right? Like you don't need X, X, and X and X. We're going to get you what it is you need to be protected and to be able to sleep safe at night, knowing that you're protected. So I'm curious as to, though, some of the main challenges that maybe you see with, I know it's obviously hard to say because there's probably different challenges across different, company sizes or different industries. But if you maybe had to, pinpoint it, what would you say are some of the most common challenges that, your customers are usually faced before working with you? And how do you really help them overcome those?
Yeah, a lot of our clients are 50 million and below. These companies don't know where to start when it comes to cybersecurity. They've had multiple conversations with vendors. They come out of those conversations more confused than they were when they went in. So they don't know what the first step looks like. Because of that, they fear the costs of actually putting money towards cybersecurity. It sounds like a huge, daunting task. They have to spend 6 figures to get some sophisticated tool or complex system in place. And that tool only addresses one area of security. Maybe it's monitoring their system. But if they're just monitoring, somebody can get right in the door. So you have to have that holistic approach. And honestly, they're really confused about what their main threats are because they're reading the news. These executives are watching the news on TV, and they see all different types of these complex cyber attacks happening. So they're so confused that they don't act. They're just putting cybersecurity and stuffing it into a corner. And we help bring out those demons of, we're going to help you actually put it right in front of you on the table. We're going to put the puzzle pieces out. We're going to build a puzzle that makes sense to you. And we're going to tell you exactly what it's going to cost to build your entire security standard, not just a piece of that puzzle, which is what they're getting now from a vendor standpoint.
No, it makes total sense. And I think that, whenever I'm talking to people who don't know a lot about cybersecurity, I think the hardest part is always trying to take a really complex topic like cybersecurity and dumbing it down to a digestible point for a lot of people to kind of take in, because there's so many different tools that you can implement. There's so many different, ways that you can secure your environment. And I think that that's, as an IT leader or someone that is, trying to adopt a protocol inside their business, they get overwhelmed by the amount of choices that they can kind of take upon. They can buy an EDR solution. Is it just this? But then I have to monitor it. Then I have to have somebody else monitoring and checking the endpoints. So to kind of have that partner and come inside your business and say, hey, like, we're going to build this from the ground up and make sure that everything is going to be compliant standard in the future, and also be able to keep your company safe. That's number one priority. It takes a lot of pressure off those leaders to kind of develop them that's themselves. So
Mhm.
great point too as well.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add there, I want to give credit to the tool companies because they are addressing critical areas, these technology companies, but most of them are addressing a point of the security standard. They're not addressing a big chunk of it.
Hmm.
Um, and what we do is we help companies make sure the tool, the technology is going to be a good fit for where they actually want to go from a security perspective. So we do work with tool companies to make sure it's right for the company and help them make those budgetary decisions. So we're not leaving them out of the equation. We're not developing a software platform. We do leverage tool companies, but the organization has to have a use case for that technology in order for it to fit, which I think is very important from a vendor standpoint. Not every tool is best for every organization. And that's something
Definitely.
we recognize. And a lot of executives say my friend's using it, so I have to use it, and that's not always the case.
No, 1,000%. And I think it's that knowledge, that partner that kind of comes into the play where it's like, hey, we're going to find out what the best solution is for you and not try to force a solution onto you. Because I think that's sometimes where maybe cybersecurity companies get a bad reputation is they try to force a solution onto a company that may not need it, may not be ready for it, and it's like giving that kind of comprehensive approach where it says where you guys are at now, where you guys are trying to plan to grow, this is the best solution for you.
Yeah.
And well, great. Well, great. Well, I'm glad you got a chance to kind of talk about a little bit about Valor Cybersecurity, what you guys are building over there. I did kind of now want to segue a little bit into obviously, what you're kind of just you as a person, kind of talk a little bit about what are the challenges and roles in the role as a partner in a cybersecurity company that you're kind of experiencing in the day to day life as of right now.
Yeah, I like to pull from my athletic background. I always say, and I train people to get into cybersecurity as well because I went through that grueling process at one point in time. You have to be failure fit. You have to be willing and ready to fail and to be able to push through that. Most people, I'd say 8 out of 10 people that you have conversations with around cybersecurity do not understand it.
Mhm.
So you have to understand that you can't spend all your time educating people. The biggest three questions that we ask every person we have a discussion with is, do you know your cybersecurity threats personally and for your business? Do you have a response plan if something bad happens? And then what is your budget to spend on security? If they don't know the answer to those questions, then they don't become a good person potentially, or they become a great person for us to work with if they know a little bit about it and they want to work to improve it. So we always try to find, and this is what I do as people, you have to meet people in the middle. You have to know who you can serve. You can't serve everybody. And I think that comes from them understanding that they have room for improvement. So that's kind of me bringing my personal aspect into it is, you have to have failure fitness in cybersecurity in order to excel in this industry. You have to be ready to fail and you have to have thick skin. This industry is still very young. It's not super developed. There's not a lot of standardization in it, as I mentioned before. It's very young, so you have to be an innovator. You have to be somebody who has thick skin, who's willing to hear, you're absolutely crazy. Digital security doesn't exist. It hasn't happened to me yet. And just kind of have that thick skin to say, okay, I'm telling you all the things that I know about this industry, what I've seen. You can either, drink the water. I've brought you to the water. You can either drink it or you can run the other direction. And if you need us, we're a phone call away. And I think that's that thick skin coming into play.
Definitely, definitely, and I think that's such an important point to kind of touch on as I think one of the biggest challenges with selling cybersecurity, or if it's talking with people who don't understand the gravity of the need for cybersecurity, right? And like you said, you can only spend so much time educating everyone that you talk to, but sometimes people don't want to carve out the budget for it, right? And that's just they don't want to spend any money on it, and they're like, you know what, we think that we should only spend this amount. And this is all we want to spend. It's like, well, okay, we hope you the best. We hope nothing happens to you. But I've heard a lot of stories where people they've not wanted to spend the money on cybersecurity, and then it kind of comes back to haunt them because when they then do go and have a cyber attack, that's when they prioritize it. And it's like That's the worst time to prioritize cybersecurity is after you have a breach, and that's usually when I feel like a lot of companies do tend to prioritize it. It's after something has already occurred inside them.
Hmm.
So that's a great point to you as well. I did want to ask you in terms of the sales and marketing challenges. I know I touched on a little bit of them, and you kind of touched on them as well. What would you say are some of the the most common sales and marketing challenges that you've experienced inside your business? And if you've had any type of advice that you could give to other people inside cybersecurity on kind of what has helped you.
Yeah, I think it's hard to build trust in this type of industry. There's a lot of fear mongering going on. Some people like to be fear mongered and it drives them to buy. But a lot of people in today's world are starting to sniff that out, where they've heard so much fear mongering around cybersecurity and they've taken the risk of, I'm not going to act on it. And maybe something hasn't happened yet. So they're like, those people are just trying to scare me to sell me. And that has lost trust in the industry between the security industry and then the business executive industry. And those mindsets right now are still in shambles. And that's one of the things with security standards we're trying to help rebuild with the executives that we come across. And it's a security is a soft sell, as I say. It's not a hard sell. It's a I am going to talk about security in a way that you understand, so that once that light bulb goes off, that sale is going to take place because they're going to ask you, how do we work together? And if that doesn't take place and you try to hard sell somebody on security, maybe it's a big enterprise. You can hard sell an enterprise, but you can't hard sell a small, medium-sized company on security unless they have a compliance requirement. And that's where the industry now. We serve companies that have compliance requirements, but the reason we got our foot in the door is because we educated them to a point that they had the light bulb go off and they now know they need to secure their business. And that's why they pay us on a monthly basis, is to be that voice, be that translator for what's going on in the security market, to actually keep their standard up to speed with best practices. And that gets them aligned with compliance. And I think that's most important to understand from a sales and marketing standpoint. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of advertisements from heavily invested in cybersecurity companies, a lot of fear mongering. There's not a lot of translation. That has been one of the biggest things in my career I've always tried to do, is translate complex topics, which I think a lot of people in cybersecurity are, somewhat translators, because it's such a wide variety of coverage. You have to know a little bit about a lot of things, or a lot about a little. There's a lot of scientists, a lot of law enforcement, former military
Yeah.
folks that doesn't most of the ways they describe things don't resonate with the private sector. They don't
Mhm.
understand with people that think all about money, think all about strategy, think all about operations from a business and people standpoint. They understand a security mission from a national security standpoint. And that's really where a lot of the convoluted messaging comes into play. And that's no one's fault. It's just a collective of where the industry is. And that's one of the biggest problems we've seen, is speaking the language of the business owner. A lot of people say that, but if you're not a business owner, it's hard to relate to that executive. And a lot of people selling security today aren't running a business or have no experience actually paying payroll, running a business, signing checks, making sure you have the amount of revenue to get it there. The people that are focused on those things, the CFOs, the CEOs, the COOs, they don't want to hear that all that's going to be, torn away from them, and they need to spend $100,000 on this tool in order for that not to happen. They will take chances on that, but if you take the time to soft sell them, to educate them, to get them further along in their understanding, their consciousness around digital security, that's where magic happens. And that's the only way I've seen security sold in the right manner, where it stays around in that organization for a long time. One of the stories I like to pull on is, I worked for a consulting company and we basically revamped one of the Fortune 50's cybersecurity programs from scratch. They had every big four consulting company in there. We basically went in and did what we call resource rationalization, scraped out all the consultants they had and rebuilt it from scratch. And they were spending millions of dollars on security. But all of those companies were addressing a point solution. None of them were working together. They were all addressing one area of a security program with 10 areas. And they had 10 different consulting teams on those 10 different areas. Nobody was talking to each other. And that's what security is today for a lot of companies that have a large security budget. Nobody's working together. There's no centralized dashboards. There's no translation to the business. And that is putting the security industry behind the curve, because if we want to protect people, and most people are in this business for the right reasons, we're going to have a hard time doing it if we don't get buy-in from those folks who are signing the checks. So there needs to be a better lexicon. There needs to be an easier way to get hired in security. And that all comes back to language and a common understanding of why digital security is a need, not just after the fact, but before something bad happens. And I think that's really on the sales side. Marketing is all messaging. And I think we just need to improve our messaging and how we're talking about this stuff. And that's a big part of the translation, which I think you guys as a company can really help folks do, is think about it from the business standpoint and not just from a fear-mongering standpoint.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that you touched on a lot of good points. I think that's one of the primary, I feel what we've seen the most success with when we are, marketing or selling any type of cybersecurity, it's always down to education, right? It's always going to be, how can we help educate our prospects? And the sales cycles are really long in cybersecurity and in IT in general. So that's kind of just the way of the nature of the game, right? Like the contracts that usually people are on, they're usually a little bit longer. So you kind of have to, there is a part of that where you do have to like play that weight game and make sure that you are staying top of mind with those people and you are continuously educating, you're producing content, you're coming out with new things around the topic, so that, like you say, you're holding their hand along the way. And I think that's great. That's great advice. And what we've seen really successful with the companies that we've worked with as well. One of the things I did want to touch on just a little bit, because I'm always fascinated. I know we were talking about this a little bit off camera, just about mindset and kind of what's really needed to be a successful entrepreneur, to be a successful high level executive inside of a business. And I wanted you to kind of maybe touch on some of the things that you think are really important and the mindset that you really have to cultivate in order to kind of see that success in business, in whatever areas of business it is.
Yeah, you got to be a little crazy. It's one of those areas where you're taking a lot on your shoulders, which nobody can do alone. And I think that goes back to, you have to have mentors and people around you who can help tell you when you're wrong. And you have to accept that aspect of, you don't know it all. You're never going to know it all from a business ownership standpoint, operating a department. So you have to have that transparency. And I think that goes back to asking the right questions, being able to ask authentic questions to your team on, what do you think I do well? How do you like feedback? That was one of the things that I learned in baseball. I had a great coach ask me, how do you like feedback? And nobody ever asked me that before. This was in the minor league. So this was, 10, 12 years into my career. Every coach just gave me feedback. And sometimes I felt like, terrible for the next week. Sometimes I felt that feedback elevated me. I think that's one of the biggest things in business ownership, is asking anybody you interact with, how do you like feedback? And tell them how you like feedback. Because if you're not giving each other feedback, you're not learning, you're not growing, your company is going to be stagnant. And honestly, a company falls to the wayside when they run out of cash or they run out of time. And you can really buy time if you give each other good feedback. And if you pivot and are able to put yourself in a good position in the market through giving each other feedback, you're never going to run out of cash. And that's going to keep you in a long business life cycle that's going to build a company and continue to grow in the right direction. Companies fail also because of that people friction. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody thinks the same. Not everybody's on the same mission. So it's a lot about adaptability as well. You have to be adaptable. I think a lot of people talk about that. But that means when stuff gets hard, you have to be able to snap yourself back into it and not get into a victim mindset. I think that's the biggest thing in business, is we like to feel sorry for ourselves because we're going through something hard and say, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But snapping yourself back and saying, the reason I do this is because I want to make an impact on something. And that's why you see like the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musk, these CEOs that have done insane things in this world. They had that ability to snap themselves back into it, to say, with Steve Jobs, it was all about design. With Elon Musk, it's all about engineering and kind of manufacturing. But they throw themselves back into the area they know they excel when things get hard, because they know that's the core of what they're offering the world. So that ability to kind of have a short kind of mindset around, okay, failure happened, I need to snap back into it and get on the right path. And that's the only way you become successful as a business owner, is being able to learn lessons, but be able to move on in a short kind of time frame. Because if you start to sulk in your own pains as a business owner, it's going to affect your team, it's going to affect your company. And honestly, there's really no time for that in a business, because a competitor will eat you up if you allow them to do that.
Yeah, no, man, you just dropped a whole bunch of gems. I feel like I adopt a very similar mindset, and it's so easy because I mean, I don't think anybody tells you how hard building a business. Well, people tell you how hard building a business is, but I don't think you realize it until you're actually building the business, right? And so a lot of the times you can overwhelm yourself, you can take on the anxiety, you can take on the stress that kind of comes with the job. But I think one of the things that I always remind myself is that, first of all, the problems I have really aren't that big of problems, right? Like, I always remind myself that. I'm like, man, like the anxiety that I'm having, I'm like, is someone gonna die tomorrow if this doesn't pan out the way I want? Like, there's people that are in life or death situations, people that are in way worse conditions than I am, and for me to be complaining about the situation that I'm in, I always kind of take a step back and be like, okay, my life is pretty good. I have it made compared to a lot of people. So that always takes a lot of anxiety off of me, a lot of stress, and it helps me really focus in on and hone in on what are the important things, and then really just try to operate without fear. I think that's a big, like, obviously fear is like should be a driving force in what you do, but I think if you operate in the terms of like growth, right, and you have that mindset where it's like, okay, even if I fail, I still learn something, and even if this doesn't go exactly the way that I want, I still got the experience from this, and I can do this faster now. I can do this better. I learned this skill. So there's always something that you can kind of take from everything that's gone wrong in your life, or everything that's gone wrong in your business, and you can use it as to your advantage as well. So it's a great point. I think it's all about kind of building that grit and that ability to, when circumstances aren't the best, to continue onwards. I was listening to the speech the other day where it said that every single victorious person at some point experienced an opportunity where they felt like they wanted to quit, right? Like, you're always going to feel like you want to quit. There's always going to be some type of doubt that comes into your mind, but it's the people who are able to kind of push through that go beyond that are able to see that success and see where they, what their true potential really is. And I did want to ask you a question in terms of, what it is that you can do on a daily basis to really start to build that mental fortitude and start to build that grit in order to kind of overcome those challenges that are going to come with business or going to come in life.
Yeah, for me, I'm a systems guy. I try to push willpower out of the way, because I know willpower will not put me in the position that I need to continue to go on when things get hard. So I'm a big systems guy. I always think about health, physical health, mental health, spirituality, and then financial. So that's how I structure my day. You only get one chance at health. You can start another company, you can make sure that you build something or get another car. Like, you can always kind of get more of, or reset in some of the areas of your life financially. You can go bankrupt. You can do a number of things to reset in that aspect. They're forgiving, but your health isn't. So I build my day based off of that. I tell my team that every day. The 9 to 5 model of operations was started by big tech. That does not mean you need to work 9 to 5. You could work 5 to 7 in the morning. You have to figure out what's best for your life so you have physical and mental health. Because if you don't have that, to me, you have nothing. You're not going to have a successful business. There's been people out there who have died, and maybe they leave behind a successful business. But what if they focused on their health for an hour a day? They could still be alive to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So I'm big on that, starting my day with physical and mental health. I think that's most important for business owners to push through. That's something that I do each and every day, just because I know the benefits of it. I've been through multiple periods of my business. I call them seasons, because I was an athlete, in different seasons I went through of growth where I wanted to quit. I was, at the verge of quitting. And what I like to say today is the brightest sun comes out after the darkest night. And when I pushed through those moments, even though I was on the verge, I was, sitting in bed with negative in my bank account, or not even the ability to go out and get another credit card to fund that next, product or service, or, a client left, or something of that nature happened, which felt like the end. When I got past that night, that season, the next day, something crazy happened. Two people called me back and said, "Hey, we want to start working with you." And I'm like, that's another chance to do something great. And I would say that to anybody. There's a point where you have to pivot, and maybe you have to make a change, but go through some darkness, and I guarantee, things are going to play out way better than you thought they would if you were to give up or go a different direction. And I think that's where a little bit of the craziness comes in, when you give it that time to breathe, and you give it that time to just fail just enough to where you get that breakthrough. That's what a lot of people, I think, later on in business don't talk about, is what failure felt like and how they went through, not just one failure. Most people will talk about one distinct failure. They went through 20 failures over and over and over again. And then they finally had a successful business, successful in their eyes, and they keep failing. So they're just like so failure fit that they don't even recognize failure anymore. They just learn lessons, and then they get better, better, better. And then they're at the top of their game, top of their industry. And they forget about what it was like early on. And that's why a lot of people don't talk about it. They just talk about the habits they have now, making your bed, and some of the core things they do today. Because a lot of us, and you can think about this as like, women giving the miracle of birth. Like a lot of them forget about what it was like during that birth process, because their brains, they're going through such a chemical process that it was so painful that they forget about the pain. And I think that happens with business as well. When we put ourselves in a high risk situation, we forget about what that felt like in the moment to be able to consciously convey it to the next generation. And I've been able to come across some incredible people that I think are consciously competent enough to convey the different seasons they went through. And that's what I try to bring to the folks around me is, really talk authentically about what that pain felt like in the moment, why I was going to quit, and what pushed me through to get me to that next season. I keep stacking those positive seasons, and it makes our company and myself as a person, better and better from each one of them. And that's what I'm trying to get more people to. And when I talk about, what business owners need to do, I think that's one of them, is just have that grit, like you mentioned, to keep pushing on, when everybody else would quit. That's what makes a great company, a great team.
Definitely. Yeah, no, 100%. I think all the things that you said definitely resonated. And as you were kind of talking, even about the failure aspect of things, right? Like you get so used to just failing, you get so used to like things not going your way. Obviously, it's kind of like in the same instance of like sports, right? Like I think it was Kobe Bryant who had the most missed shots in NBA history. Like he missed the most out of any player, but like people consider him like an all time great. But he missed so many. He missed the most shots in the NBA. So it's like, but it goes right to your point that he got so used to just missing shot, he would just take the shot anyway. And I think that's kind of the same mentality you have to have in business as well. Because, like you said, there's very few people that I've ever met that have started a business, their first business, and it became successful, or it was just like one thing and it was just, it took off right away. I think that it requires that amount of sacrifice to different things. You have to almost pay your dues, right? Like there's different things that you have to try in order to finally get that. So I do think that's great advice. But hey, man, it's been awesome talking to you. I hope people obviously take a lot of the advice you've given them today and really implement inside their business and their lifestyle. And if obviously they want to, if there's another business owner that's going to be checking out cybersecurity, they obviously can talk to you guys as well. I think you guys got something very unique going on there at Valor Cybersecurity. Just wanted to ask you if people did want to reach out to you, they did want to contact you. What are the best places to kind of do that?
Yeah, we're huge on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/Greg-Tomchick. You can go to Valor. So that's VALOR-cybersecurity.com. Extremely active on the website. And we typically have our phone number on there, so you can give us a call, ask some questions, reach out. we don't feel like there are any dumb questions in cybersecurity. A lot of executives think they know it all, so they don't want to ask dumb questions. But we're in a digital revolution. We're not even past the halfway point. Companies are going to continue to need to adjust their technology, and we just want to be a reasonable voice to make sure you're protected and have a standard in place, just like you have on your personal life side. And we're here to support.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll make sure to include those both in the description. Thank you again for coming on, man. You did a phenomenal job today. And if you guys did watch it all the way to the end, we really do appreciate it. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe for more related content. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care. Ciao.
Thanks, Alessandro.